Welcome to the SAG-AFTRA Foundation's Conversations at Home program. I'm Jim Hemphill. Now, without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce actor Jared Leto from WeCrashed. Welcome, Jared.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
It's great to have you here. So I guess, I want to start. I was surprised to read that you came on to WeCrashed when there was basically just one script written out of the eight. They just had the pilot. And I'm curious what it was about that script that appealed to you and made you willing to take the leap, and what it was about this guy, Adam, that intrigued you.
That's a great question. And I think what attracted me the most was the opportunity to tell a story that was so recent and relevant, and kind of step into the shoes or the no shoes, the bare feet of such a colorful and charismatic character. Those were the most compelling things, and of course, right alongside that, the opportunity to partner up with Annie Hathaway was something I jumped at.
Well, one of the things I like about the show is that it takes this guy who a lot of viewers, myself included, had kind of preconceived notions about, and it looks at him fairly non-judgmentally. And I'm curious, did you have preconceived notions about Adam going into this? And if so, what were they?
I didn't know much about the story. I had heard of Adam through some tech friends of mine, and I'd heard about that he was a really colorful character. Of course, I'd heard about the business. I've been in WeWorks in different parts of the world and was always pretty blown away by the buildings, by the product. But the more that I dug in, the more fascinated I was. And, it's just this incredible story of an immigrant who comes to this country and builds a company from nothing into a $47 billion empire. And we examine those great successes, but we also examine the great failures as well. But I do think there are a lot of preconceived notions. We kind of put people into buckets, and he kind of went into the bucket of, oh, you're with this group of people over here, but it's more complex than that. And I think I'm glad that the show does clarify this is a guy who's never been charged with a crime. He didn't commit fraud. He didn't mislead his investors. He succeeded wildly and he failed wildly. And we look at those things. But he certainly wasn't a fraud. I do believe that he believed in what he was saying and doing. And, quite possibly got caught up and made bad choices and didn't use good judgment. And, we look at that.
Well, that leads me to another question, which is what kinds of obligations do you feel when you're playing a guy who is A, real, B, still alive, versus when you're playing a fictional character? I mean, are there different concerns that you go in with, and how do you deal with those?
That's another really good question, because I do feel probably a greater sense, a greater obligation to get things right with a person that's still alive, especially a younger person like this, who has a family, who is still has a lot of life left to live. And my job as an actor is to find understanding, it's to find connectivity, it's to find similarities, it's to find those nuances that I can relate to and grab a hold of, and to hopefully bring an impression to the screen that tells the story of this life, this character.
Well, that's interesting. You talking about, what you need to grab a hold of, because something I always wonder about you, your performances, you're clearly a guy who likes really transformative parts that allow you to kind of completely disappear. And so I'm always curious for you, how much of it is finding some connection with the inner life of the character that you have in common, and how much of it is just purely an act of imagination?
It's a lot of both, to be honest. And like I told Adam Newman when I met him, it's never going to be him. This is going to at the best. It's an impression, and it's painting, not a photograph. So you do as much research as you can. You try to get all the facts in order, the circumstances, getting understanding of the character and the motivations and the world and the vernacular, and give yourself some truth there, and then you let your imagination take over, and you serve the story, you serve the plot, you serve the other, your character, the other characters in the project. So it is a little bit of both.
And so you said you met with Adam. At what point in the process did that happen, and why did you want to meet him, and what kinds of conversation did the two of you have?
Well, I wanted to meet him. He wasn't involved with our project at all, of course, but and no one else met with him from the WeCrashed team. But I thought that I would regret not meeting him, and I thought that I did give it a great deal of thought, and I believed that, and I still believe that it was more beneficial to meet him than not.
And so you mentioned the research that you have to do. So for something like this, what does that research consist of? I mean, are you just sort of scouring for any footage you can find of him, reading every story, listening to the podcast? I mean, is it something where you're just doing a total deep dive into everything you can find about this guy's life?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the good thing about it being such a recent, relevant story is there's a ton of material. I mean, we're just buried in interviews and video footage and audio, and of course, there's the podcast and the book, and and then talking to friends and people that worked with him. But really, you want to learn as much as you can. I love the process. I love the preparation. I love the research. I love the practice, and so that's a really important part for me. And in this case, there was just a ton to play with.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things I guess there's so many aspects of this character and this performance that I'm curious about, but one is the voice. Like, how do you get his voice down? What's the process of training yourself to speak in those rhythms?
Well, I had come from actually House of Gucci, so I was doing an Italian accent, and then just weeks later, I'm doing an Israeli one, and I like to do accents. I enjoy exploring different dialects. I think it's really fascinating the way that even the history of dialects. I think is really just a fascinating thing. And in this case, when you learn about people, you learn about where they're from, you learn about their history. It not only serves the character and the role, but it also kind of teaches you, it educates you, and that's a beautiful thing just all around. But I had a great team of Israelis that were helping me out. I had that voice, that dialect around me all the time, and we just practice. I was really intent on capturing his voice because it's a very strong characteristic, and a really defining characteristic. It says a lot about who he is, the way he speaks, how he speaks, and his verbosity, his emphasis, his rhythm. Those were all essential things to capture.
Well, you mentioning his verbosity. I mean, another thing I was thinking watching this, I'm not an actor, but it seemed to me like this dialogue would be so hard to memorize some of it because when he's talking sometimes in just all of these facts and figures and numbers and things like that. I mean, maybe this is kind of a silly question, but how do you memorize all that stuff?
It is an interesting question, and if I saw it right now, I would tell you you're crazy if you thought that I would have to learn all of this stuff and then be ready, in such a quick. We didn't have very much time to prepare, but when you do that, it's like anything else. There's some kind of muscle that gets stronger, and the more often you do it, the quicker you retain things. And of course, just understanding why you're saying what you're saying is always the best course of action. If you understand that your character is hungry, you don't have to really memorize it. Let's go get something to eat. It's that kind of thinking about the logic behind things, the circumstances, and then getting familiar with the numbers, and understanding where the business is at a certain time in the lifeline of the company. But there were a lot of facts, a lot of figures, a lot to memorize. But I loved the challenge. I was really up for it. I really enjoyed how much dialogue there was. I'd never really taken on anything. I'd never had a character who had so much to say, and I really loved that.
Yeah, it almost felt like a 40s Howard Hawks movie or something to me, the way it just had so much rat-a-tat dialogue. And
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
The dialogue was really like it was like the action
Mhm.
and the piece, and it was exciting. And knowing that as well, you go into scenes, they have to have their rhythm. They have to have their. It's like every scene was a song, and they needed to have their ebb and flow. They needed to have their crescendo. They needed their payoff, and we really got into that. We it was one of those projects where it was just really creatively rich. Had an amazing group of people that were all like-minded, and we shared this idea that maybe we could create something special and share it with the world, and hopefully be really satisfied and rewarded by the work.
Well, in terms of the rhythms of that dialogue, obviously it's hugely important who your partner is on screen. So with Anne Hathaway, talk a little bit about the relationship with her and your collaboration with her, because I think the love story is also a really interesting facet of this that I wasn't necessarily expecting going in. And it was definitely an aspect of Adam and the WeWork story that I really knew very little about.
Yeah, and I think that Lee and Drew did a really smart thing in focusing on that partnership, on that love affair, and it's genuine. I mean, you can say what you want about these people, but they have a very committed, beautiful relationship. I think they have 6 children now, and it's an enviable relationship in so many ways. But Adam would be the first to say that Rebecca was everything, and he none of this, none of his achievements, none of his successes would have been possible without her, and he really found in her, I think, that perfect partner. But working with Annie, I kind of feel similarly that she always delivers. She's one of the best. It's easy. People ask me about the chemistry. I say she has enough chemistry for both of us, so I didn't really need to have very much. She probably would have the chemistry with a doorknob if she wanted to. But I always knew that she would be there for me, and I'm certain to safe to say that she knew that I was going to show up prepared and have something to offer as well, and kind. So it was a really good creative partnership, and I think I just have a lot of respect for her, and I think she's just a terrific actor.
Well, you mentioning that there's that trust between the two of you, that you both knew each other was going to come fully prepared. I'm curious, obviously I don't want you to name names or anything, but I'm just curious, for an actor like you who clearly you take this all very seriously, you're very disciplined, you're very rigorous in your research. When you come up against another actor who maybe isn't as thorough, or even a director who isn't as thorough, or as you approach this stuff, I mean, how do you deal with that? Because I would think that with someone like Anne Hathaway, it's probably it's like you're playing tennis with a great player. I mean, all you have to do is kind of bounce the ball back and forth. But what do you do when you're not getting that back from one of your collaborators?
Well, you have 2 choices. Love and compassion, or and I think the other one's probably just not a good choice, but so I think you got to have as much love and compassion as well, and remember that there is always a moment where we're not as prepared as we want to be, but I think what happens too with this sort of situation is, I think word probably travels fast, that like these people on set aren't fucking around. They're really focused and going for it. So that's kind of nice, because it sets the bar up, and probably people, it's just like when I get on the set with Denzel, I'm not going to be the guy on Denzel Washington's set that's not prepared. I'm going to know my character's first name, last name, middle name, what finger I pick my nose with, whatever it is, I'm going to know the answer, and be prepared. And I think that's great. You know, our fellow actors do that for us. They can reset the bar. They can challenge us. I certainly wasn't fucking around. I knew this was a beautiful creative opportunity, so I was going to come in, you know, over prepared. But you know, sometimes people, one thing that happens, we have a lot of day players in this. A lot of people come in for half a day, third of a day, and I love that opportunity because for me, we had such incredible actors in New York. I mean, my God, the actors that would show up for one or two lines, it's just mind blowing, and it's hard to do that. I mean, I've made a career out of playing small parts, and it's intimidating, it's challenging, it's filled with pressure. Since I've been in the position a lot, I always try to embrace that opportunity with them, and I try to do my best to make their time more valuable, or richer, I should say, and makes the scene richer. So I love to try to include or improvise or ad lib something with someone who's in a much smaller role. And that's a lot of fun for me, and I know it's a lot of fun for people to walk away with a much deeper experience, and that's a nice thing to be able to do, to get to the place where you're able to extend that opportunity to other people like it has been extended to me. I have a lot of fun with that.
Well, continuing on this topic of collaboration, I'm curious about some of the differences between doing a television series like this and a film, because I think of you, when I think of you, I often think of like your collaborations with big directors, whether it's Ridley Scott or Denis Villeneuve or whoever, and Fincher. And a TV show is a little different because you've got different directors for different episodes, and the showrunners are kind of the consistent thread. I mean, does that change your approach or your experience at all, or is it pretty
It
similar?
doesn't change a thing for me. The only thing that was different is that, I mean, the amount of time that we're shooting, it was like we shot a few movies at once, because we were shooting for 6 months. So, and usually I'm taking on a smaller part. So it could have been like literally 8 movies for me, because every episode was basically more than I've been in any movie in the last 10 years, almost. So that I loved. I liked that there was a different director all the time. That was really fun to see how different people would work. And yes, you have Lee and Drew, and bringing all their talents, and they're there, and so that's consistent. But I loved it. I mean, you work just as hard on a character you're going to show up for and do 2 weeks on. Then, I mean, I worked just as hard for Neander Wallace as I did for Adam Newman.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of preparation, in terms of character, in terms of approach, the nice thing about Adam is you work so hard on a character, I got to spend that much more time with him. So a lot of times for me, I'm done with characters. I'm kind of like, wait, give me a little more, I'm not ready to say goodbye. But this, I was buried in material, it was nearly 6 months, and I loved every single second of it.
Well, I was also wondering, you mentioned a little earlier that you came into this fairly quickly after House of Gucci, and knowing how immersed you become in these characters, I'm just curious how you kind of make that shift from something like House of Gucci to this, because I would think that, and again, House of Gucci, like you're saying, was probably not anywhere near as long, but it's still a very transformative character, and you sort of have to suddenly like switch that guy off, and now you're churning Adam Newman on. I mean, is that something that just comes naturally to you at this point, or is it difficult to make that transition?
I wouldn't call it easy. It certainly was I thought it was going to cause more problems than it did. Thankfully, it didn't. I thought that I would fall back into Paolo because it's such a strong character, and physically, in the way that I moved, even my hands, my body, the way that I walked, the way that I spoke, I thought there was going to be a period of overlap that we would have to really address and spend time with. But I just dove into the work, and Adam appeared, and Paolo went away, and it was quite a beautiful thing to work back to back like that. I don't often work on films that. I don't work on films that often. I don't make that many movies. But in recent times, I've worked more, and that's been really, I gotta say, it's been quite a beautiful thing. It's been really gratifying. I've learned a lot. I've had the first time in my life, I've had a little momentum with the work, and I've been able to, apply what I've learned in one film to another film. And, I feel like maybe WeCrashed is a culmination of, some of that momentum.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, as a fan of yours, the last 6 months has been kind of glorious because it's like at House of Gucci, and then there's WeCrashed, and there's Morbius, all kind of on top of each other, and it's been great because I think one of the things I like about you is that you do seem very selective in a way where as a moviegoer, I can kind of trust you. Like I know if you're in a movie, it's going to be interesting. There's going to be something unique about it, and I'm curious what at this point in your career motivates your choices. I mean, what kind of considerations go into deciding what movies or TV shows you're going to do?
I was just remembering when you said that too, and that I had forgotten about jumping back into the Joker with Zack Snyder, and that was all in the same run. So really four different, really different characters, and I enjoy that. But as far as things that are left to explore, I mean, it's a great question. I enjoy taking big swings. Like I'm not, if someone wants, like if there's a character who kind of mumbles through a movie, I'm probably not the guy for that. Some people do it beautifully, and like just they're so natural and so subtle, and you could watch them for hours. But I'm just not that interested in that. I don't think I'd be that good at that. But we'll see. I enjoyed exploring comedy. I thought that I thought even with little things, I thought that was very funny to me. I thought it was strange. It was a strange character, but I thought he was hilarious. And I'd love to explore, like, I think that WeCrashed was explored, some comedic elements, and that'd be pretty fun.
Well, and Gucci is hilarious. And
Oh yeah, Gucci as well. Yeah.
And well, again, keeping that in mind, the whole thing where with you do these very bold, transformative performances, and another interesting component of that to me is just the physical changes, the prosthetics, in something like House of Gucci or WeCrashed. I mean, what's the process of working with the people who are doing your prosthetic makeup and your teeth and all that kind of stuff? How important is that in terms of shaping the character, and what kinds of conversations and collaboration do you have with them?
Well, it's crucial. It's crucial, and I've had the fortune of working with amazing teams. Both on House of Gucci. What an incredible team of people who did the work so quickly, like impossibly quick. And then recently worked with Kazu again, who did the work on WeCrash. But it's essential. The thing is that if you don't have the heart and the soul, the spirit, none of this matters. It's safe to say, I mean, you could get rid of that and give a performance, but it does, it's an exciting thing to be a part of. I've done it many, many times. Even in Fight Club, I had tons of prosthetics, and that was like in '98 or something. I can't remember, but I do enjoy that. I do kind of enjoy pushing to the edges of character, and finding a place that you haven't been before, a way of being. I think that's pretty fascinating. And we'll see what the future has in store, but I definitely have spent a lot of time in the makeup chair.
I know that when you were younger, you were interested in becoming a fine artist, and then now obviously you've got 30 Seconds to Mars, and I'm curious how these other disciplines you're interested in or that you practice, like being a musician, how does your work as a musician inform your work as an actor and vice versa? I mean, is there a connection between the two?
In a practical sense, you learn from everything that you do, and you can apply whatever you learn to whatever else you're doing. I mean, that's just a fact. But I definitely would not have been able to play Adam Newman if I hadn't stood on stages around the world communicating to people. He was a master communicator, And, that certainly gave me an edge, being able to stand on those stages and give those speeches and look at crowds of people. But, touring around the world with 30 Seconds to Mars has changed my life. It's taught me about, different cultures. It's shown me the world. I've spent time, shooting and editing videos and writing songs. And, it's a place where you have a lot of different kinds of experiences. And then I take what I learned there and I apply it to my work and my life as an actor. But this project was a blast. There wasn't a day on set that I wish I was somewhere else. It was a beautiful thing. And, I love being part of a series as well, I have to say. Like any actors out there, like kind of, they're still holding on to that precious notion that, I'm a film snob. I love cinema. I love theater. And that's what I always aspired to do. But the experience, the process was no different, maybe in some ways even richer because of the amount of time I got to spend with the character and the different places that I got to go. But it's a beautiful thing to be a part of a show that kind of touches culture. And then week after week, people are discovering new elements and following a storyline for a longer period of time. That's quite a beautiful thing.
Definitely. Well, I think that's a great note to end on. I want to thank you on behalf of the SAG-AFTRA Foundation for coming and sharing your experiences and process and craft with your fellow performers. This has been great, Jared.
My pleasure, and hope to see you guys soon. Thank you, brother.